Hello class. So we are going to talk about the integer class, the double class, and the math class. And this will be a shorter conversation because College Board won't spend quite as much time on these topics, and there's not as much to dive into as there are with strings, although they are extremely useful at times. So if you see in the Java quick reference, we do have something called the integer class, the double class, and the math class. And so these are the things that we're going to be covering here. And the integer class has a constructor, which creates a new integer, and you have to give it an int value. It's got a field called integer.minValue, and that will tell you what the minimum integer value you can have is by either an int or an integer. There's a max field, and then there's a value, and so the value is what we'd say is an int. And then double has a constructor and just a double value. Those are the only things that they're really asking for you to get to know in this instance for College Board. Now, if we go on to Oracle's documentation for the integer class, the integer class has a lot of stuff going on. We don't need to play with all of that stuff, and in fact, we're not going to play with a lot of that stuff, but we may need to use it at some point, so just through the school year. If you are tested on any of the stuff that is not on that little sheet, there will be clear documentation in your test before you're expected to use anything. So the integer class, there's also a double class and a math class that you can look up, and there's plenty of information there. So let's get to the code. So I set this up already. I set up a little main, and I made an integer named u, and I said that's a new integer, and its value is 2. And I have an integer named k, and that's also has a new integer, value 2. Now, if I don't have a value here, you'll see that it will break because the constructor must have a value. So there is no constructor without a without passing in a parameter. So you must pass in an int for this to work. So I'm going to put that back at 2. Clear that screen, and it compiles. Now, the first thing I'm going to print is are u and k equal to each other? So I set u to 2 and k to 2. And I'm going to take a second, think about it. Are u and k equal to each other? Is 2 equal to 2? And if you said yes, you're actually incorrect. So these are not primitives. These are classes, and classes point to memory locations, and their memory locations are not going to be the same. So when I run this, it gives me false because these are two different memory locations. Now remember, int a equals 2, int b equals 2. Now if I say print a and b, that's going to be true because those are primitives, and primitives are not by reference, they are by value. So a and b are true, but the object integer is not equal to the object integer here. Now, how do we compare them? Well, you can get the int value out of these. So what you can do is you can say u dot int value and k dot int value. Oops. Get it in the right spot. And then it will return the int values, which are primitives, and then it will give you the results you're expecting, which is true and true. So why would you ever want to do this? Well, there are a lot of things that you can do with integers that you can't do with ints that are just built in. So if you wanted to use some of the features that come with the object, you'd want to use int. Double's the same thing. I'm not going to go into it in this video. What I will go into is the math class. because, well, actually, before I go into the math class, there's one other thing that I'd like to point out. So if I print u.min value, u is defined up here. It's a class. It's a type of integer. It's an object, and you've seen it's going to be at -2 billion. Is it? It's like -2.1 billion, and that is the minimum value you can have as an integer. If I do -1, it's going to give me a weird result. And we're not going to go into why, but it actually flips it to be the largest number possible. We'll talk about that briefly in class, but it's not necessary to understand right at the moment. We'll cover it in class. But if I didn't want to have the u, if I just wanted to say integer and not create this stuff, I can actually do that as well. And that's where some of these math functions are going to come into value. Isn't to assign values to them, but to use them. So we're going to look at the math class really quick. And remember, this is going to be an object, so I could. So let's just do this. So here we're going to not create a new object, but we're going to say math dot. And we're just going to call the functions that exist in the math class. So math.abs for absolute value. -10. So if we print that, it's going to print the absolute value. So we're not creating a new class. We are just we're just using this the way we use the integer min value on the last one. And so you can say abs, and if you pass in a double, you'll get back a double. If you pass in an integer, you get back an integer. That's an overloaded function. You can do power, POW, and you give it the base and the exponent. So POW, the base 2, the exponent 15, and that will do that math function for you. You can do square root. I don't need to go through square root and random. Actually, no, I'll do square root and random. So square root of 8. And it gives us 2.8. Now, let's see if we can do this with power. So power of 8 and square root should be 0.5. Should give us the same thing, which it does because any 8 to the 1/2 power is the same thing as square root. And then the last thing is random. Random will give us a number between 0 and 1, non-inclusive to 1. So, and we will use this quite a bit. So math.random, what's it, capital or lowercase? It's lowercase. So that will give us a random number between 0 and 1, not including 1. So you can think of that almost as a percent. So what's cool about 0 to 1 is if I want the number, this is from 0 to 1, non-inclusive to 1. If I multiply it by 5 times, I will get the number between 0 and 5 because 0 times 5 is 0 and 1 times 5 is 5. So that would just, that's a way to expand what it is, your range. If I want a number between, say, 10 and 20, well, that range is 10. So what I can do is I can say, let's multiply by 10. And so that would give us 0 to 10. But 0 to 10, if I add 10 to that, that would be 0 would become 10, 10 would become 20. So that would become between 10 and 20. So if you just add, that becomes the minimum. So the last piece I'll point out, I'll say is it's range times math.random plus minimum. So that's a little shortcut on how to get random numbers of any range. So your range times your math.random plus minimum. Thank you, and I will see you in class where we'll go over this more.